My name is Caleb Warren, and this story was told to me by a snowplow driver named Martin Klein during a night when the highway closed faster than we could clear it. He said he wasn't asking me to believe him, only to remember it, because remembering, he claimed, was the only thing that kept it from choosing you. Martin had worked winter roads in Minnesota for over 20 years. He knew every drift-prone curve, every frozen culvert, every place where the snow piled higher than it should. But there was one stretch he hated: County Road 6, between the old quarry and the river bridge. Flatland. No trees, no lights. Just wind and snow and a mile-long straightaway that felt longer every winter. They called it Miller's Walk. The name came from a man named Owen Miller, though no one remembered him clearly anymore. What they remembered was his wife, Sarah Miller, and their son, Thomas. In the winter of 1978, the Miller's car broke down on County Road 6 during a whiteout. The engine seized. The heater died. Snow filled the world so completely that up and down disappeared. Owen told Sarah to stay in the car with Thomas while he walked toward the quarry lights he swore he'd seen through the storm. He wrapped a scarf around his face and stepped into the snow. He never came back. Hours passed. The car grew colder. Thomas cried until his voice went hoarse. Sarah wrapped him in every blanket she could find and told him stories about summer, about lakes and fireworks, and warm grass under bare feet. When the crying stopped, she thought he'd finally slept. By morning, the storm had passed. Rescue crews found the car half buried. Sarah Miller was alive, barely. Thomas Miller was dead, frozen in her arms. Owen Miller's body was discovered 3 days later, less than a quarter mile from the car. He'd walked in a wide, looping path, as if the road had kept moving while he stayed still. After that winter, drivers began reporting strange things on County Road 6. A figure walking along the shoulder during snowstorms. A man with his scarf pulled tight around his face, head down, trudging steadily forward. Martin saw him for the first time in 2004. He was plowing late, snow falling thick and fast, when his headlights caught movement ahead. A man walking into the storm, back turned, shoulders hunched against the wind. Martin slowed and leaned out the window, shouting that the road was closed, that he'd give him a ride. The man didn't turn. Martin eased the plow closer. The man's boots didn't leave tracks. That was when Martin noticed something worse. The man was walking in place. His legs moved. His coat shifted in the wind. But the distance between him and the plow never changed. Martin accelerated. The man stayed exactly the same distance ahead. Martin slammed the brakes and sat there, heart hammering, watching the man continue to walk without moving anywhere at all. After a long moment, the man slowly turned his head. His face was pale and cracked with frostbite. His eyes were open too wide. Snow drifted through him like smoke. Martin backed up until the figure vanished into the snow. He didn't plow County Road 6 for 2 weeks after that. But the road had other habits. Drivers started reporting a child standing by the shoulder during storms. A boy, wrapped in a blanket, holding something tight against his chest. He never waved. He just watched cars pass. If you stopped, The boy would lift his head and ask a single question. Most people drove on, some didn't. In 2011, a college student named Aaron Walsh pulled over during a storm after seeing the boy. Her car was found the next morning, engine running, door open. Footprints led away from it. One adult set, one child-sized set, circling the road again and again until they disappeared into drifting snow. Aaron Walsh was never found. Martin said the worst sightings happened when the storm was just beginning, when people still believed they could make it through. One night, 3 winters ago, Martin was plowing County Road 6 again. The radio crackled with warnings. Visibility dropped to nothing. Snow erased the horizon. Then his headlights caught a familiar shape, a man walking ahead of him. Martin felt his stomach drop. The man walked, stayed still, walked forever. Martin whispered, "I remember you," into the cab. The man stopped. For the first time anyone could recall, Owen Miller stopped walking. He turned fully toward the plow. Behind him in the swirling snow stood a boy and a woman. The boy clutched a blanket. The woman's arms were wrapped around him, her face hollow with grief and fury. They weren't walking. They were waiting. Martin understood then. Owen Miller wasn't lost anymore. He was looking. The plow engine stalled. The radio went dead. Martin shut his eyes and said their names out loud. Owen, Sarah, Thomas. Over and over, like a prayer, like a roll call for the dead. When he opened his eyes, the road was empty. The engine started. By morning, the storm had passed. Martin refused to plow County Road 6 after that. Retired early. Moved south. Before he left, he told me this story and said one last thing. They don't want rides, he said. They want company. That night, driving home through falling snow, I took a different route. But even so, my headlights caught a man walking along the shoulder of a road that shouldn't have had anyone on it. I didn't slow down. In my rearview mirror, I saw him keep walking, right where he was, waiting for the next set of lights to come along. Story number 2. My name is Jonathan Pierce, and this story was told to me by a woman named Lillian Moore during a winter blackout that stranded half our town in the dark. She said she'd sworn never to repeat it, but the cold has a way of loosening promises, especially when the snow keeps falling and the night won't end. Lillian lived alone at the edge of a small New England town called Frost Hollow, where the houses thin out and the woods begin without ceremony. She was in her late 70s when I met her, sharp-eyed and steady-handed, the kind of woman who'd survived more winters than she could count. When the power went out that night, I checked on her out of habit. I asked who. She nodded toward the window. Back in 1962, Frost Hollow had a schoolhouse at the far end of Old Mill Road. 1 room, 23 students, a single teacher named Margaret Klein. Winters were harsh even then, but the town prided itself on never closing the school unless it had to. On January 14th, the snow started before dawn. By noon, the roads were already thick, but Margaret kept the children inside, confident the plows would come. They didn't. By the time the storm turned violent, it was too late. Visibility vanished. The radio in the schoolhouse crackled once and went dead. Parents tried to reach the building but were turned back by drifts taller than their trucks. Margaret made a decision she would later be blamed for, even though none of them would live long enough to hear it argued. She decided to walk the children home. They bundled the kids in coats and scarves and mittens, tied them together in pairs with rope so no one would wander off. Margaret led the line, breaking the snow with each step. Lillian was 9 years old then, small for her age, holding the hand of her younger brother Peter. The wind screamed so loud they couldn't hear each other cry. Halfway down Old Mill Road, the white swallowed everything. Houses disappeared. Trees vanished. The world became nothing but snow and noise. One of the children fell, then another. Margaret tried to keep them moving, but fear spread faster than cold. Lillian remembered the moment her fingers went numb. The moment Peter stopped responding when she squeezed his hand. They never reached home. The search lasted days. When the storm finally cleared, they found the line of children frozen where they'd fallen, scattered along the road like dropped dolls. Margaret Klein was found at the front, arms outstretched, face turned toward town. Only Lillian survived. She didn't know how. She woke up in a drift, half buried, wrapped in a coat that wasn't hers. Peter's scarf was still looped around her wrist. The town never recovered. Families moved away, the schoolhouse was boarded up. Old Mill Road was rerouted, then abandoned. Years passed. Winters came and went. Then the sounds started. Lillian said it began with footsteps outside her house during snowstorms. Too light to be adults, too many to be one person. She'd hear laughter sometimes, thin and distant, carried on the wind. Then came the knocking, not on the door, on the windows. Small taps, uneven, like frozen fingers testing the glass. She never opened them. Others weren't so careful. In 1987, a man named Richard Hale went missing during a storm after reporting that he heard children crying outside his house. His front door was found open, snow piled inside. No footprints leading away, no body. Over the years, more stories surfaced. Drivers on the old stretch of road seeing a line of children walking through the snow, hand in hand, led by a woman in a long coat. They never seemed to get closer, no matter how fast the car went. And sometimes, only sometimes, one child would turn and look directly at the driver. Lillian leaned closer to me as the lantern flickered. "They're still trying to get home," she said. I asked her why she stayed. Her mouth tightened. "Because they follow me if I leave," she said. As if summoned by the words, a sound drifted through the dark house. Soft, rhythmic, footsteps. Outside, the snow fell heavier, muffling the world. Shadows moved past the window, low and indistinct. A child's voice rose, trembling with hope. I froze. Lillian didn't move. "They remember my name," she whispered. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Something pressed gently against the wood. Another knock came, then another, patient and polite. "Please," a small voice said. Lillian reached over and turned the lantern down until the room sank into darkness. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, names I realized, one after another. The knocking went on for a long time. Eventually, it stopped. When the power came back the next morning, I left Frost Hollow and never went back. Lillian Moore died that same winter, alone in her house. The coroner said it was peaceful. But every January, when the snow piles high and the nights stretch thin, people driving near the old road report seeing a line of children walking through the storm, hands linked, faces pale and hopeful, and one of them, they say, always looks like they're waiting for someone to come back and walk with them the rest of the way home. Story number 3. My name is Thomas Avery, and this story was told to me by a volunteer named Ruth Delgado during a winter shelter shift that ran 3 days longer than it should have. She waited until the snow stacked against the windows like packed dirt, and the wind learned the building's weak spots before she finally spoke, as if the storm itself needed to be listening. Ruth had lived most of her life in northern Montana near a place called Black Elk Pass. It wasn't really a town, just a cluster of houses, a closed ranger station, and a narrow mountain road that cut through pine and rock before dropping into open land. In winter, the pass closed more often than it stayed open. In February of 1995, Ruth worked dispatch for the county. That was the year the search and rescue calls started to repeat themselves. The first was a family from Idaho, Aaron and Melissa Vaughn and their daughter Claire. They'd ignored the road closure sign and driven up Black Elk Pass just before a storm hit. When they didn't arrive at their motel by nightfall, Melissa's sister called it in. By the time rescue crews reached the pass, the storm had buried the road. They found the Vaughn's car nose first in a drift. Doors open, interior empty. Footprints led away from the vehicle. 3 sets, heading uphill. They never found the family. 2 weeks later, a lone hiker named Daniel Price went missing in the same area. He'd radioed that he could see lights through the trees, that he thought there was a cabin he hadn't seen on the map. That was the last transmission. Then a trucker, then a pair of snowmobilers. Always the same detail. Lights where there shouldn't be any. Always uphill. Locals started whispering about the shepherd. The story, Ruth said, was older than the road. Back before it was paved, a man named Elias Rourke lived alone in a cabin near the pass. He raised sheep in the summer and stayed through the winter, despite warnings. People said he didn't like company but hated silence even more. One winter in the early 1900s, a sudden storm trapped Elias in the high country. His flock scattered. Desperate not to lose them, he went out into the snow with a lantern, calling, ringing a bell, walking farther from his cabin than he ever had before. They found his sheep in the spring. They never found Elias. But sometimes, when storms rolled over Black Elk Pass, people reported seeing a man walking the slopes with a lantern. Sometimes they heard a bell, and sometimes, this part was new, people said he wasn't alone. Ruth said the calls always came during whiteouts, when visibility collapsed and panic set in. Someone would radio in, breathless, saying they were lost, saying they could see a light ahead. Dispatch would tell them to stay put, to conserve heat, to wait. Some of them didn't. In 1998, Ruth took a call she never forgot. A teenage boy named Luke Harlan had gotten separated from his snowmobiling group during a sudden storm. His voice came through the radio, thin and shaking. "I see him," Luke said. "There's a guy up here." Ruth told him to stop moving, to sit down and stay where he was. "He's calling," Luke said. Ruth asked Luke what the man looked like. There was a pause. "He's wrong," Luke said. The radio crackled. Wind howled over the line. "He says I shouldn't be alone," Luke whispered. That was the last thing Luke Harlan ever said. The next morning, search crews found Luke's snowmobile buried near the trail. His tracks led uphill, circling wider and wider, until they disappeared into deep drifts. Nearby, they found a broken lantern globe and a rusted bell half frozen into the ice. After that, the pass closed earlier every year. Ruth transferred jobs not long after, but the stories followed her. Hikers who swore they were guided partway down the mountain by a quiet man with a lantern, only to blink and find themselves alone. Drivers who saw a light pacing them just beyond the trees, always staying ahead. "They don't all die," Ruth said quietly. I asked her why anyone would follow at all. She looked at me, tired and serious. The storm outside the shelter finally eased near dawn. As people filed out, pale and exhausted, Ruth stayed behind, watching the windows. Before I left, she told me one last thing. "They've started reporting children," she said. "Walking with him now. Quiet. Obedient." That night, driving home through falling snow, I took the long way around the mountains. Still, on a distant ridge, I saw a single point of light moving steadily through the trees, slow and patient. Then another and another. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't follow. Story number 4. My name is Henry Lockwood, and this story was told to me by a woman named Marjorie Ellis while we waited for a ferry that never came. Ice grinding against the dock like teeth. She said she was only telling me because winter had already chosen its witnesses, and one more wouldn't matter. Marjorie grew up on the edge of Lake Erie near a dying lakeside town called Greyhaven. In summer, it pretended to be alive. Tourists, fishing boats, children running barefoot on cracked concrete. In winter, it emptied out, leaving only the people who couldn't afford to leave, and the lake itself, vast and watching. The lake froze hard some years. Other years it only pretended to, skinning itself with ice that groaned and shifted like something breathing under a blanket. In January of 1971, Greyhaven lost 6 people in one night. They were ice fishermen. Walter Pierce, his sons Frank and Michael, a cousin named Edwin Moore, and 2 local men, Joseph Klein and Robert Ames. Experienced, careful. They went out together just before dawn, hauling sleds and augers, promising their wives they'd be back by dark. By evening, a snowstorm rolled in off the lake, fast and mean. The wind erased the horizon. The men didn't come back. Search crews went out the next day. They found the fishing holes, the sleds, a thermos still warm enough to steam faintly in the cold air. But no men. What they did find were footprints, 6 sets, leading away from the holes and out across the ice toward the open water. Not running, not panicked, just walking, evenly spaced, calm. The footprints ended where the ice thinned to slush. No bodies surfaced that spring. After that winter, people started hearing things on the lake. At night, when the ice was thickest and the world went quiet, fishermen on shore would hear voices drifting across the frozen expanse. Men talking, laughing, calling out measurements, sometimes singing, low and rough, the way men do when they're cold, but pretending they're not. If you followed the voices, they always stayed just out of reach. Marjorie was 16 when she heard them for the first time. She and her brother Daniel were walking home along the shore after dark, wind stinging their faces. The lake lay flat and white, moonlight glinting off the ice. Daniel stopped suddenly. He asked. Marjorie did. Voices, men's voices, familiar somehow, even though she couldn't place them. "They're out there late," Daniel said. Marjorie felt uneasy. The voices carried again, clearer now. "Good spot here," one of them said. "Yeah," another answered. Daniel stepped closer to the edge. Marjorie grabbed his sleeve. Something shifted beneath the ice. A deep, hollow sound rolled across the lake, like a giant clearing its throat. The voices laughed. Daniel pulled free. He took one step onto the ice. The surface didn't crack. It didn't break. It sighed. Marjorie swore she saw shapes moving beneath the ice then, dark forms gliding slowly directly under the voices. She screamed. Daniel turned back, startled, and the moment broke. The voices faded, dissolving into wind and distance. Daniel stumbled back onto shore, pale and shaking. They never spoke of it again. Years passed. Greyhaven shrank. The ferry stopped running in winter altogether after a truck drove straight onto thin ice and vanished without a sound. Marjorie left town, married, had children. Daniel stayed. In February of 1994, after a week of brutal cold, Daniel went missing. His truck was found parked by the lake, driver's door open. His boots stood neatly beside the shore, toes pointed toward the ice. Search crews dragged the lake when it thawed. They found nothing. Marjorie came back for the funeral they held without a body. Afterward, she walked the shore alone, snow crunching under her feet. The lake lay frozen and smooth, stretching endlessly. The sun dipped low. Then she heard it, a familiar voice, carried gently across the ice. "Margie," it called. Her knees nearly gave out. "Come look," Daniel's voice said. Shapes moved beneath the surface, slow and patient, gathering near the sound. Marjorie backed away, sobbing, hands over her ears. Behind her, ice groaned, long and deep. She left Greyhaven that night and never returned. Now, decades later, she stood beside me at the frozen dock, ferry canceled, ice pressing in from all sides. The lake stretched out, pale and endless, exactly as she described. She asked quietly. I shook my head. "They think the lake remembers them," she said. A sound drifted across the ice then, faint but unmistakable. Laughter. Men's voices, someone calling out a name that wasn't mine, but felt like it could be. Marjorie stepped back from the edge. I did the same. The ice shifted beneath the sound, dark shapes rolling slowly below, waiting for someone else to believe the lake was holding them up. We didn't stay to listen.